Now we are moving into the book of the Song of Solomon, also called the Song of Songs. Now, there was a big debate among the Jews whether or not to include this in the scriptures at all. Many Jews back in the second century, there was a big controversy in the first century, and in the second century, the Jews got together to form the canon, to kind of review it, make sure it was all good. And a lot of people didn't want this to be there. They considered it only a love poem, not scripture. And so there was this big debate. Eventually it was left in, mainly because it is attributed to Solomon. And the basic reasoning was, well, Solomon was a wise man, and everything he wrote has to be good. Has to be scripture, basically. Solomon wrote it, it's scripture. And so that was the basic reasoning that eventually made it, settled that controversy with the Jews. Now, I'm pretty sure it was still part of the scriptures that were available during the time of the New Testament, and as part of the Septuagint, the Greek Septuagint translation. I'm pretty sure it was there. And so it made its way into the Christian Bible, basically on the same reasoning that Solomon wrote it, so it has to be scripture. But what it really is, it's a love poem, somewhat erotic love poem. Possibly written by Solomon or to Solomon, but could have been written later, we don't really know. And in order to make any doctrinal sense of it, you can't take it literally. You have to turn it into an allegory. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, like, the Jews would talk about it as being the relationship of God to the nation of Israel. The lovers in the poem are God and Israel. Christians would then turn this to the relationship of Christ to the church, or to his bride, metaphorically speaking. But it does kind of pose a small issue there in that for the rest of the scriptures, the relationship of God to Israel or God to the church is one of master and servant more than anything. He is king. We obey him. But the Song of Solomon talks about this as more of a partnership, equals together in a relationship, which is how it should be between a man and wife. And so it poses somewhat of a difficulty there for religious allegory. But we've settled the issue. We've settled the issue. We don't have any problems with this in the church. We don't have any issues with this because we have the Joseph Smith translation. Now, what the Joseph Smith translation is, I will repeat, this is an inspired translation or correction of the Bible done by Joseph Smith to restore portions that had been lost over the years. Now, this is a complete Joseph Smith translation of the Old Testament. It has every correction that he made, but the Song of Solomon doesn't appear in here. No corrections were made. Now, why is this? Well, there is this note right here. It doesn't appear in this because it's not a correction. It's just a little note. Like with the book of Ruth, he put in a notation. The book of Ruth is translated correctly as it stands. There were no need for corrections. With the Song of Solomon, we have this. The Joseph Smith translation manuscript states that the Songs of Solomon are not inspired writing. These aren't scripture. It is, quite literally, just a love poem. Somewhat erotic, somewhat tantalizing, but not scripture. And so when we read through the scriptures, we can ignore it because it's not inspired. It is not actually scripture. It has no doctrinal relevance or meaning. However, because it is still printed as part of the King James Bible, and the church uses the King James Bible, we still have it within our scriptures. And because of this simple fact, I am still going to read it. I don't know how much commentary I will be putting in it. Probably not a lot. I find the whole thing to be somewhat silly and weird. It's been a long time since I read it, though, so we will see. But I just wanted to make this clear that even in other religions, other denominations, they really have to stretch in order to make this book even appear doctrinally relevant. Because it's kind of like taking Romeo and Juliet and claiming that it was this great allegory about the relationship between God and the church. It doesn't make sense. So I will see you in the Song of Solomon. We're going to have some fun.